Hi, this is Joshua at TechSpec, and in this video, we're going to be going over advanced personalization in Gmail, covering settings, themes, and labs. So if this is what your Gmail looks like, especially if you're in the Alisal School District, you can see the logo up here. But if this is what your Gmail looks like, then you haven't set any customizations, and it's functional, and it's great, and it works, but it can be a little bit boring. So let's talk about themes. Let's have something a little nicer to look at when we're looking at our email, which a lot of us end up spending a lot of time looking at email every day. So I'm going to click on my settings and I'm going to come over down to themes. So I'm going to click on the gear to get into settings, and then I'm going to come into themes. So you can pick from a bunch of different ones. So you can the first up, we have these photos, which are kind of pretty and nice. If I click more images, it goes into even more like stock photos. And these are really easy to change. So if you just pick one and you select it, it will apply it. And then you have these other things. So you can apply a vignette, which sort of darkens the edges a little bit. You see, so the edges become a little blacker, darker. Maybe easier to read your your labels and your Google Hangout chats over here, or you can turn that off. Additionally, you can apply a blur to the background if it's a little too, that's sort of extreme. If it's a little too like clear and kind of gets in your way, maybe. But maybe that will just drive you nuts. I'm going to turn the blur all the way off. And then you'll notice right here where my emails are, this is the sort of light theme. If I switch it to dark, then I get a black background for all my text, and my text is in white. That happens to be what I prefer. But and then I click save, and ta-da, pretty email. Now, if you don't want photos, you can go back into themes. And below this, you have just sort of color blocks or patterns. So like maybe you want just this kind of single color. And when you do that, though, you don't get your choice on the vignette or the text background thing. If you ever want to come back, the default theme is called light. You can always just come back to stock, so it's not really that hard. There's some other photos here. So for example, if we chose the mountains, but you see, again, when I'm choosing these lower ones, some of these things are locked, these lower photos. When I start with these images on pretty much all of them, I will get these extra options for text background, for blur, and for vignette. Now, if none of those are to my liking and I don't like the, I can click into my photos. And if you've been backing things up into Google Photos, then you will have some here. So for example, if I use this Alisal Google Forms background, then it will try to make a theme out of that. How's that for school spirit and district spirit? It's a little blurry. So that's how you can change your theme, and I'm going to change it to the one I typically use. So like dark. So this is my theme. So that's much nicer to look at, but what else can I do? So if I click here into the gear again, and I'm going to come into settings. Well, if you saw the other video on this website about settings, then you've seen there's quite a bit of stuff in here. There's labels and how to configure your inbox is here. Right now, I'm using a tabbed inbox, but there are also, and that's the default, but you can set it so that things marked important are first, or all of your unread messages are first and on top. And why don't we go ahead and take a look at that? So I'm going to head back to my inbox. And so right now I have this thing called a tabbed inbox. So I have these categories on top, and because I'm very diligent about my mail, there's not much in my categories. So how you set that up is you come to your gear and you say configure inbox. So if you hover over each of these, it tells you what each category does. And what Google does is it looks at the kind of email that's coming in and it decides what is this. So if you had stuff coming in from Twitter or Google Plus or YouTube, it would put it into social. If you had things coming in from vendors or where it looks like you're being asked to pay for something, or promotional like sales, those would go into promotions. Updates is where you're going to find calendar invites and Google Drive share notifications. And forum is if you are on a Google group or a mailing list or an online community. I almost always have include starred in primary turned on because I set a lot of filters where I tell it to star things that I don't want to go there. Now, this email actually started out in promotions, and you can see when you move things from category to category, you can actually train Gmail to learn these things. So the conversation has been moved to promotions. I can undo it if I needed. Do this for future messages from this person. Yes, now it will move everything over from that person. Will go into promotions. If this is here and I'm like, oh, that's not a promotion, that's social, I can just drag and move it around. And then when I click over to social, I'm going to put it back in my primary. So here's the reason I use this. I use this inbox because it basically cuts out whole categories that are not really urgent for me to look at right away. I consider primary my main thing. So if you use a tabbed inbox and you the other reason I use the tab inbox is because this is what the Gmail app, which I highly recommend, especially if you're on an iPhone, I highly recommend using the Gmail app. It's just a better experience. If you color code your labels the way I do, all the color coding carries over and it uses these categories and it will filter things for you. And so I always just make sure I check my primary inbox multiple times a day. I check the other category ones less frequently. And once you get a sense of what's in those, in my non-work Gmail, I ignore whole categories. So let's take a look at some of the other ones. So let's say there's this email from Isti. So now I have a read email and an unread email. And I'm going to mark this one as important. That's what these tags mean. And then you can star by clicking on the star. And there's quite a few different colors and symbols that you can cycle through. And I'm just showing you those and I'm going to turn it off. So let's go back into our settings. And then let's look at our inbox. Now, by default, we have that tabbed inbox and I don't have forums turned on. So I'm going to switch it to important first. So once I go important first, it has all these other options. So there will be two inbox sections, important and then everything else. Unread items go in the first section, or I could use these buttons to change it. I have turned on the show important markers, and that's what that little yellow tag is. And then there's a couple of other ones here. So let's save the changes and see what it looks like. So now if I had a bunch of email, anything that was marked important would be in this top chunk and everything else would be in the bottom chunk because it's not important. You see, this is an unread email and it's in the everything else because it hasn't been marked as important. Now, if you set up filters, you can have it automatically mark things as important as they come in. For example, you could say anything from my boss always goes, it gets marked as important, and then it would be in your top section if you stayed this way. So let's go back to our settings, and we're going to come back to inbox and see it says unread items in the first section, and it didn't inbox unread count because that's just what counts. So this number here, see, inbox says nothing unread because I'm telling it only in the unread section. If I said unread in items in the inbox count, then when I click save, watch this inbox now, because even though it's not important, it's still unread. So like I said, there's lots of each different type has its own set of settings. So you can have important first, you can have starred first, and starred and important are two different ways to mark up your email to do like flagging and notes to yourself. There's priority inbox, which again is set up important and unread, then starred, then empty, and then everything else. So when we save, we'll see we have like broken up into several other categories. So this is important and unread. So this is important, but it's read, it's not unread. So it's not in that top starred. So if I star this email and then I refresh, it moved it to a different section. So that's priority inbox. And then to configure again, we'll go to settings and then inbox. And then you have this unread first. I'm going to save changes, and you'll see this is all my unread email, and then this is everything else. That's not my particular favorite way of doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the tabs and the categories with primary, social, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a way to set up your inbox. So there's one other thing that I want to show you in this video, and that's going into the gear to get to our settings, going into settings again, and then going to this tab over here called Labs. Labs are things that you can get your email to do that are sort of experimental features. However, most of these have been here for years, and they're pretty stable. They shouldn't hurt your email. So one that I use all the time, you see I have my folders here, and when I mouse over here, you can see all my labels, but then when I move off, you see my Hangout chats, and I have another video about Hangout chats, but I have all this space for emails. So actually there's one that I really like called Right Side Chat by Emily C. So I'm going to turn it on, and it will change. And when I save the changes, it will reload the mailbox. And what I really like about this is now I can see all my folders in a row on their own, and my chats, once I refresh, once it loads, are all here, right? So I've got my chats over on one side, my Google Hangout chats over here, my labels over here. Let's look at some of the other labs, because some of them are really quite useful. So Auto Advance, what it does is when you've read something, automatically shows the next conversation instead of going back to your email after you delete or archive. So if you delete and it will take you back to your inbox. If what you want is to just go to the next email, you can turn on Auto Advance. Another one that is really useful if you find yourself sending the same sort of response over and over and over again is you can turn on Canned Responses. It says email for the truly lazy, but I think it's email for the truly busy is a better way to say that. So if you find yourself replying to vendors or replying to teachers, and you always have to start it the same way, you can turn on Canned Responses, write your form letter, if you will, an email, and then what you do is you load the canned response, the form letter, and then you can customize it before sending, so you don't have to retype it or copy and paste it in from another place. In any case, those are themes and customizations and inbox customization and labs. And hopefully this will help you make Gmail your own and work perfectly for you. And happy Googling.